A couple of questions that frequently get asked in a sprint is, are we ready and are we done? Now, what do we mean by that? Well, I really look at Scrum as being a process that takes a item from a ready item from our sprint backlog or team backlog and gets it to something that's done, part of the increment that can be accepted by the product owner. So really what a sprint is about is taking work that's ready and getting it done. And so if work is ready, what does ready mean? And what is the definition of ready? Well, for me, I think the best definition of ready is that it's asking the question, what shape should a product backlog item be in before we're ready to pull it into the sprint and be able to make an honest commitment to the product owner. So that's really important. We're saying that we're able to pull this in and commit to getting it done. So why is this important? Well, I've been in a lot of sprint planning meetings that got difficult because the stories weren't ready. I've seen situations where the team couldn't agree on what the size of the story was. I've seen situations where the team is all of a sudden trying to split the story because they've suddenly realized that the story is far too big to implement in a sprint. And then I've seen problems where, oh my goodness, this story has dependencies on other stories and we will not be able to get it done in this sprint. And so this is where it's from not being ready that you hear these stories of these 9-10 hour sprint planning meetings as they try to remediate this situation. And needless to say, sometimes tempers will flare at about the 7th or 8th hour in these meetings. In my personal view, a good sprint planning meeting lasts at most a couple of hours. It's smooth, we go through the backlog very quickly, and that's when the stories are ready. If we have ready backlog items, we should be able to flow through the sprint planning meeting very quickly. So what is a good criteria for saying, is a story ready? Well, I like to borrow from the so-called INVEST criteria. This is a criteria that was coined to describe what the qualities of a good quality user story are. And I think, it goes through, it's independent, it's negotiable, it's valuable, it's estimatable, it's small, it's the right size, and it's testable. So these are all the kind of things what a good story should be, or a good backlog item should be. The three that I've highlighted and read here, I think, are highly relevant to determining whether a story is ready, whether a backlog item is ready. The first is independent. To get this piece of work to done, to get this backlog item to done, does it depend on other stories or backlog items in your product backlog that are not going to be done until much later? If that's the situation, then it's not independent. We should be able to implement this story in this sprint and not have any dependencies on other stories that are later on, or have a strategy for mitigating those dependencies. In other words, we built into the plan the creation of mock objects so that we can say it's done with respect to those mock objects, that it is testable. So very important, is it independent? Can we get it to done? The other attribute that we're interested in here, and I think this is the most important one, is the story or backlog item estimatable. This is your real test if the story is ready, because if the team cannot come to a consensus sizing on the story, it is most definitely not ready. Because if the team can't come to a consensus sizing, it means there's not enough knowledge surrounding what this backlog item is about, what its scope and what it entails, to make an informed consensus decision on how big this thing is. So I've been in sprint planning meetings where two sides have dug their heels in and there is no opportunity to be able to go out and get the information that we need to resolve the deadlock. And finally, it's the right size. It's small. It is going to fit into the sprint and we can deliver it. So if a story is not independent, if it's not estimatable, and if it is not small, it's not ready. So how do you get things ready? Well, there's this idea of grooming, or some people call it story time, or some call it backlog refinement. And it's simply the idea of working your way through the backlog such that you have 1 or 2 sprints worth of ready items. It's a regularly scheduled meeting where the team gets together and they pull items from the backlog just as if you were going into sprint planning and ask the question, can we estimate it? Yes or no? If no, why not? What information do we have to get? What pieces of information are we missing before we can put a size on it? This is really important. So we may take a story, and we can't put, as a team, we cannot come to a consensus size on it. So we say, all right, split that. Let's split a spike off. Let's go and have a story that someone will do research to get the extra data that we need to understand that story. That's really important. Does it have dependencies? Maybe it does. Okay, maybe someone has to create a story that says, yeah, I'm going to have to get some mock objects. Or maybe we'll reprioritize the backlog such that the dependencies are shifted. So these are all important things that we want to do in these so-called grooming or story time meetings. And what I would suggest here is that, let's say you're running a 2-week sprint and Tuesday is your planning day. So the first Tuesday of the sprint is your planning day. Then the next Tuesday should be your story time or grooming meeting, such that every Tuesday you have a regular standing meeting where the team sits down with the backlog and either builds their sprint plan or is working through and grooming that backlog to get the stories ready such that the sprint planning goes fluidly. Because it's in the grooming meeting where you can see upcoming issues. You can see which stories are too big and need to split, and you've got some time to do something about it. You can see which stories have dependencies and work with the product owner to reprioritize, or maybe come up with a story to create the mock objects. Or you can see that the story is far too big and you can split it. Not in a panic in the sprint planning meeting, but have some foresight and thought of what is the optimal way to split that story. I strongly recommend the establishment of a story time or grooming meeting in your sprint. Most of the teams that run into great difficulties, usually one of the root causes we could trace it back to is the lack of a story time, grooming, or backlog refinement meeting. So I strongly recommend you put a focus on getting stories ready.